Greetings! Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our weekly videos. Today we discuss China's recent military exercises around Taiwan and the prospects for a new Taiwanese leader who may be the island's last head of state. From May 23 to 24, Chinese Eastern Theater Forces, including infantry, Navy, Air Force, and missile forces, conducted the Joint Sword 2024 exercise around Taiwan. This is a serious warning to separatists and outside forces meddling in the island's affairs. Many fear that Beijing will decide to militarily ally with Taiwan and war will break out between the two. In our view, Beijing is taking gradual steps, but there is little likelihood of a military conflict anytime soon. In its annual report this year during the two-session meeting, the Chinese government did not mention peaceful reunification, unlike in previous years. This means the likelihood of military reunification is higher than ever. Since Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in August 2022, Beijing has conducted 4 series of military exercises around the island, bringing its planes closer each time. We made a video when Pelosi was in Taiwan 2 years ago, suggesting that China should thank her for the rare opportunity to lay siege to the island. Since then, China's People's Liberation Army regularly conducts exercises off Taiwan's coast, and the U.S. Air Force sends its ships and planes to patrol the surrounding waters as if visiting neighbors. For decades, Taiwan has believed that Taiwan Strait is divided by a notional median line. But Beijing has never recognized this theoretical median line, also known as the Davis Line, drawn by U.S. Air Force General Benjamin Davis Jr. in 1955 in the middle of the strait. The U.S. insisted that neither Beijing nor Taipei cross the line to maintain the status quo, but it was never given official or legal status. In August 2022, after Pelosi's visit to the island, Beijing crossed the line and Washington took no action. The aircraft carrier Reagan retreated like a frightened rabbit when China's missiles allegedly flew over Taipei. The so-called Davis Line ceased to exist, and on a recently published Chinese map, the 9-dotted line in the South China Sea became a 10-dotted line. Beijing added another point east of Taiwan to include the Taiwan Strait. For nearly 5 decades after the loss of mainland China to the Kuomintang, the Republic of China ruled Taiwan and claimed the mainland as well as an independent Outer Mongolia. When Taiwan's leader, Li Denghui, became Taiwan's leader in the mid-1990s, he launched a movement for the island's independence from China. Since then, Taiwanese authorities have tried to use the term Taiwan rather than Republic of China unless it is mandatory. The word Taiwanese, like Cantonese for residents of Guangdong Province, from a reference to Chinese living in the part of China that is Taiwan, is increasingly used by independence advocates as a nationality rather than just an identity. Newly elected leader Lai Ching-te on May 20, 2024, called the Republic of China Taiwan a sovereign country. He went further than his predecessor Tsai Ing-wen in seeking Taiwan's independence, despite the fact that 2/3 of the island's residents voted against him in the election. Lai believes that Taiwan deserves more U.S. support than Ukraine, and the U.S. did show this support before he took office. On May 8, 2024, the U.S. sent its dilapidated guided missile destroyer USS Halsey into waters near the Taiwan side of the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet declared this a routine transit to ensure freedom of navigation in accordance with international law. In March 2024, the U.S. John Finn also crossed the strait. And in April 2024, a P-8, a Poseidon anti-submarine patrol aircraft, flew over notional international airspace near Taiwan. Although the Taiwan Strait is nearly 16,000 kilometers from the United States, the U.S. Navy considers it its backyard, not China's, and regularly sends its dilapidated ships there, demonstrating to Taiwanese separatists its willingness to defend them with these rusty vessels. The new Taiwanese leader is more confident than the Ukrainian president about the U.S. willingness to sacrifice the blood of American soldiers for Taiwan's security. The island's independence supporters were persuaded that Beijing would wait 90 days to allow U.S. troops to cross the Pacific to rescue them. But Beijing has also learned from Russia's mistakes in Ukraine and will not allow Taiwan to hold back its onslaught for more than 90 hours. China's recent drills have involved its most formidable forces of infantry, navy, air and missile forces, encircling Taiwan from all sides, including the north, east, and southeast, from where foreign forces from Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Australia could come in. Beijing has called the maneuvers a punishment for Lai Ching-te, whom they consider a separatist because of his desire to secede the island. On May 20, 2024, Lai Ching-te declared that Taipei and Beijing are not subordinate to each other, implying the separation of Taiwan and mainland China into two different states. The new Taiwanese leader accused Beijing's two-day military exercises of blatant provocation and called for international support from his friends who had pledged to help him. On May 25, after the maneuvers ended, the U.S. State Department expressed deep concern, and the U.S. military also responded. Instead, two U.S. aircraft carriers hastily withdrew from sensitive areas to avoid misunderstandings and miscommunications. 2 days after Lai Ching-te's inaugural speech on May 20, in which he vowed to defend Taiwan's so-called democracy and sovereignty, Beijing launched 2 days of large-scale Joint Sword 2024A exercises around the island on May 23 and 24. They were described as a powerful warning to separatist forces seeking independence and a serious signal to foreign forces interfering and provoking Taiwan's independence. On the second day of the exercise, the aircraft carrier USS Reagan headed straight for the second island chain, while the USS Roosevelt made a planned approach to Singapore, escaping from the South China Sea into the Strait of Malacca, 3,000 kilometers from Taiwan. The U.S. military stayed out of the waters around the island lest Beijing misinterpret their intentions. The exercises were Beijing's first substantive response to Lai Ching-te's inaugural speech. Interestingly, they were dubbed Joint Sword 2024A. Perhaps 2024B to 2024 versions will follow in the coming months if the new Taiwanese leader continues to provoke Beijing with his No China rhetoric. Notably, Beijing has made no prior preparations or public announcements about area restrictions this time around, indicating the PA's continued readiness. And these maneuvers could escalate into a real war against Taiwan independent supporters at any moment. The exercises simulated various scenarios targeting separatists on the island and outside forces ready to intervene. Because Taiwan is an island dependent on imports of raw materials and exports of agricultural products and manufactured goods, cutting off its ties to the outside world may be more effective than direct military action. Nearly 40% of Taiwan's products are exported to mainland China and Hong Kong. The U.S. is the only country in the world that has such a system. If Beijing restricts trade with Taipei, the island's economy would quickly collapse. Beijing doesn't have to take Taiwan by force. Laying siege to the island may be the best option. China would be able to blockade Taiwanese ports to prevent the U.S. and its allies from supplying arms and ammunition, even if they keep their promise to help the island defend itself. As mentioned earlier, the U.S. military stayed away from the exercise areas, clearly not wanting a confrontation with the Chinese army. This clearly showed their reluctance to intervene militarily in the Taiwan issue in case of a real war in the Taiwan Strait. Nevertheless, Beijing is more confident than ever before. Compared to the 1996 and 2022 exercises, the latest maneuvers saw planes flying only 16 kilometers from Taiwan's shores. If necessary, Chinese planes can fly to the new Taiwanese leader's office in less than 5 minutes. In the West Pacific, the Chinese army is certainly superior to any other country, including the US and Japan. Mainland China's Navy, Air Force, and missile forces can hit any target in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea with their short and medium-range missiles. It makes no sense for the US to send its soldiers 16,000 kilometers across the Pacific Ocean to defend Taiwan's so-called democracy and sovereignty. Some argue that the US may go to war to stop China's rise if it cannot compete with it in economy and technology. But we hardly think that's the case. The US is a confederation of 50 states with immigrants from all over the world, and it doesn't have a strong central government like mainland China. Since the US has not defeated a major power since World War II, it is unlikely that Washington would dare to go to war with a nuclear power, China, for the sake of Taiwan, which is universally recognized as a Chinese province. The broken roads, bridges, highways, and rusty ships of the US are more like a third power than a superpower. Their economy is a bubble inflated with borrowed money from other countries. War with China would mean mutual destruction. Even if the US can wipe out Chinese cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, their own New York, Los Angeles, Seattle, and Chicago would also be destroyed. Few American politicians are foolish enough to risk their country's future for a war with China. Even former US President Obama realized this in 2008. Beijing, Taipei, and Washington all realized that there is little the US can do to save Taiwan. Therefore, the Chinese army is becoming more and more determined day by day. The May 23 and 24 exercises showed Taiwan independent supporters that in the event of a war between Beijing and Taipei, it would be lightning fast and would last days, not weeks. It is not known whether Lai Ching-te will be Taiwan's last leader and whether there will be more elections there in a few years. But it is clear that Beijing has decided not to wait another 10 years for unification with the island. 2 years ago, a high-speed railroad between Beijing and Taipei appeared on Baidu Maps with the status of under construction, crossing the notional border between China and Taiwan. This means that the reunification process has already begun and will soon accelerate. 3 years ago, I predicted that President Xi Jinping would unify Taiwan under his rule, and that prediction still holds true today. The situation is escalating by the day. Is Taiwan ready to surrender without a fight, or will it decide to make a desperate resistance? Will the US follow through on its promises to support the island with military force? It is only a matter of time before we find out the answers. Thank you for watching our video. Give us a like if you liked it, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell to not miss new interesting videos. We wish you health, prosperity, and a viable outlook. See you soon.